Welcome to Grade 1 View, the podcast for future CRNAs by future CRNAs. A new series of Beyond the Mask supported by AANA.
Whether you're about to graduate from a nurse anesthesia program, trying to get accepted to nursing school, or you're somewhere in between.
This podcast is a resource and safe space for all things nurse anesthesia.
We're your host team. I'm Kevin Chem.
I'm Olivia Kahn.
I'm Charity Garno.
And I'm Larry Sears. So grab your Mac or your Miller, turn up your flows, and get ready, because this is Grade 1 View.
Welcome back to Grade 1 View. This is Kevin Chem, joined by host Olivia Kahn. Today our guest is Jay Cobden. Jay is a 2023 graduate of Rhode Island College Nurse Anesthesia Program. He currently works as a trauma CRNA at Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mr. Cobden has voiced his appreciation towards mentorship as he grew from a nurse anesthesia resident to a nurse anesthesiologist, and is here to speak with us regarding guidance finding an initial job and working the first few years as a CRNA. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
In your own words, can you describe, why exactly you're here and what motivated you to come to the show? We met you and spoke briefly at Congress, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, my name is Jay. I graduated school and right after I was trying to figure out where I wanted to work. And so my wife and I, we moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I currently work as a trauma CRNA at Carolinas Medical Center. Coming out of school, it was overwhelming, but I didn't know if it was just my understanding of the process. And so when I was at that conference where we met, had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of different SRNAs, and it kind of dawned on me that the questions were very similar in that, what do you recommend coming out of school, or kind of just categorically, what are the things that you looked for and that type of thing? Because geographically, everyone was, with the conference being nationally, everyone was from all over the different states. So that's kind of how I realized, this might be something here. And I was lucky enough to have great mentors and guidance. And so I just kind of wanted to share that back.
No, thank you for bringing this up. I mean, I'm jealous that I didn't get to meet you at a national conference. I know Kev was out there looking fly. Everyone was saying you look real good. Yeah, always is actually a fact for our listeners out there. He is always fly. But back to you, Jay. So tell us about your first job as a CRNA, because I imagine, you had one mindset back then, and then maybe your mindset has shifted now. What can you say?
Yeah, so this is still my first job, but being in Rhode Island geographically, and it was like 800 miles away, moving down to Charlotte. And so basically the advice that I got was, and what I was looking for is to break it down and to simplify it into categories. And so I call it the 3 golden rules. So one being compensation, work-life balance, and autonomy, and really just taking an overwhelming process and just kind of simplifying it and breaking it down into those 3 things. So you want to prioritize and figure out what of those 3 things is most important to you. So for me, we have no work-life balance as a student in CRNA school. And so I was like, I really want that back. And so as my wife at the time, she's like, I want to just really do more things and stuff. So basically out of those 3, I knew work-life balance was my number 1. And I just was going to let the rest kind of fall. But I was ranking them work-life balance, autonomy, and compensation, and I was just trying to find that match.
That makes sense. I feel like I've heard of this triangle of what we're supposed to look in a career, and you hear about the 3 you just spoke of, and it's always like you can kind of get 2 of them, but you might be sacrificing one of those things, right? Do you feel like you got 2 and are sacrificing the one? I know you said that work-life balance was your priority, but did you get, as far as salary and autonomy goes, how does it feel at your job without putting your own self on blast at your hospital?
The advice that I got back in the day was, if you find a job with 2 out of those 3 things, it's the best job you ever find, as you kind of mentioned. But most jobs, almost every job probably will have 1 out of those 3. So I was lucky enough to realize, like, coming to a level 1 trauma center, being an academic facility, that I was going to have the work-life balance and maximize the autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you enjoyed your time so far? You've been, 2 years now, man?
Yeah, coming up.
I feel like a lot of folks, some, they have ties at home, right? They just want to go back to family, whatever, stuff like that. Do you feel like you sacrificed that a little bit when you moved? You said, 800 miles away from home?
Yeah, 800 miles away. Yes, my sister did live down here, so there was some kind of being familiar with the area. I think in our careers, we're always so goal-oriented just to get to CRNA school. So I still kind of am, and I knew, I got to hit this box and this box. But coming out of school, I knew my next goal was to kind of maximize the experience. And, if I worked at like a surgery center, it would probably be a lot harder to go to like a level 1 trauma center. So I said, let me take the best opportunity I can find and find these 3 golden rules, the advice that I got, and then, maximize the autonomy and the work-life balance. And I think compensation in our career, it will always be there and it will always come.
Jay, I can definitely relate to you in terms of, and I guess for me, it wasn't necessarily like work-life balance. It was, I really missed being away from my family. And I'm the oldest child. Oldest child syndrome is pretty much, I'm the poster child for it. And when I moved all the way from Baltimore, Maryland to Houston, Texas, it just isolated me so much. I've missed every holiday. I've missed all the birthdays. I've missed graduations for my sister. And I realized that what's actually most important to me is just being around family and having the ability to do that. And that was one of the things that I was really looking for the most in my job search, which is why I landed the current job that I accepted. And I'm happy to be, moving back to South Carolina. And that way I get to spend more time with my family. And while sure, I may not be making bank, to me, it doesn't really matter nearly as much because now that other aspect of my life that I had sacrificed for so long, it's now coming back to me. So I think it's given me a lot of clarity going through CRNA school.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking with the different SRNAs, I think we all, at the end of the day, make like major life decisions based on probably 2 things. One being our careers, and then 2 being our family. As far as deciding with your, like you said, your family in Baltimore and that type of thing, like if your family's coming with you, it's like perfect. But if not, obviously that's a sacrifice and you got to do what's best for you. But that's kind of like the purpose of all of this is really just to empower the SRNAs and continuing to support our CRNAs and our tech community and just kind of giving the best advice for your career. And that's kind of like I put in that category of the work-life balance.
And I'll add my own, like, because I guess we're talking from our own unique perspectives. I think my career goals, just as a single man who is pretty close to his family, I take flights a lot. I really wanted to try my best to find a job that could hit most of the triangles of like, I want to be autonomous. I don't want to work in an ACT model all the time. I want a decent 1099 structure pay. And then I also want to be in like a cool city. And I mean, I scoured the nation. I went all around the place and like, I'd go to Oregon and, the pay's great, but it's one big anesthesia group out there that I don't feel comfortable working for. And, you go to Seattle and it's like, okay, yeah, the pay there, the location's kind of cool, but like the practice model I want isn't there. I made the decision to move to Arizona. And I think a lot of people, that state just doesn't fit in. There definitely is like a sacrifice there. And I think just to kind of spin this back to you, Jay, I feel like there's a good amount of CRNAs who feel like, the independent or supervision model is the way to go. When it's like, working in the ACT model isn't effective or isn't as respected in a way. I definitely do get that vibe when I like look on Instagram posts or talk to like the pioneer, so to speak, CRNAs. How do you feel about that when you're looking at, different models and stuff? I know you had your priorities in location and family and work-life balance, but I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kevin. I don't think I realized that until after starting to work as a CRNA. And so I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's an underappreciated relationship between the CRNA and the MDA. So for me, that was the only thing I really knew is that ACT kind of model. And so working where I do now, that was something that was really important to me. I had the idea of what I wanted the relationship to be, but in school, that wasn't that relationship because you're a student. So I always picturing like how I wanted it to be. But it's something I would just say for all SRNAs that, when you're in the interview and you're thinking about this, the career that you're in and specifically that job, asking an open question like, how is the relationship with the CRNAs and the MDAs if it's that ACT model that you were mentioning? Because that relationship is so critical for our everyday. It's very like a lonely job. And we are by ourselves, behind the drapes. But the person we're talking to is the MDA, not necessarily a CRNA. So just to kind of tie it all back in, that relationship is so crucial. And you might not know until you start that job. But I have no, I guess, opinion or thoughts on the independent because I haven't done it yet. But I know a lot of people that like that, so that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was definitely one of the big things on my list too. And I think one of the things that I was asking advice for from the CRNAs that had been precepting me is, I can ask that question and I feel like any boss would sit there and be like, "Oh, it's great." And then, the reality is maybe it's not so great. So, it's like how do you figure out or read between the lines? And I got the advice that ask to shadow the CRNAs, follow them around for the day, so on and so forth, or even go on Facebook groups. I think somebody even said that to me too, where you can get a general idea of how the teams and individuals in those teams treat each other. Because, I've been through a decent bit of the hospitals in Houston, and I can definitely tell you which sites have a better relationship compared to others. And it makes your day better when you feel like you're going to work and you get all excited. Like it could be literally the worst case in the world. Like the patient could have like an EF of 15, but if you have like a rock star MDA, you're like, you'll be pumped for it anyways. That was definitely a big thing on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully the interview process, you like you said, you can have the opportunity to kind of shadow or just interview with the staff and have that opportunity just alone and ask like different things too. Like, do they ever, we call it like role reversal, but just asking like, do you guys ever switch roles? And what I mean by that is like, we're always doing the airway typically. And, maybe we miss out on like lines, but role reversal is nice. You can have that opportunity just to ask stuff like that. Like, hey, do you guys ever kind of just switch it up and, maybe the MDA does the airway and then you guys get the opportunity to do like the central lines, the A lines, the IVs and just kind of switch it up like that. That's kind of like a creative way to think about it too. But hopefully you guys, the SRNAs have the opportunity to kind of ask those questions with the staff, privately.
Yeah. One thing I did at one hospital, and I probably shouldn't have done this, but I did it anyways. The chief anesthesiologist was there, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know what this relationship's like. I took her aside during my interview, and we sat and had coffee for like an hour. And I mean, I straight up asked her, I was like, what do you think about, the CRNAs of this facility and how independent they want to be and things like that. And I definitely got her perspective. And, she seemed like a great person. She was happy. She was open to talk about it too. I don't know. Did you ever do anything like that, Jay? Like, how was your tour like in that facility?
I was fortunate enough to kind of ask. I had some relationships with people who I worked with before that were currently CRNAs there. But yeah, just really trusting in that relationship. If you have the opportunity to know someone there, and statistically, there's roughly like 60,000 CRNAs, probably
Mm,
give or take.
yeah.
So it's a very tight knit community, and someone always knows somebody in this profession, which is a good thing. It could be a bad thing, but using it to your benefit of reaching out to a friend. Oh, I have someone that works down there, or and just kind of picking their brain. But as far as like specifically asking with an MDA or at the facility, I did not. But I was just like when Olivia was talking about shadowing, just being extremely observant on how that relationship was on induction, for emergence, and that type of thing. I think sometimes too, like even when we were nurses, like when you floated to another unit, like for example, when I worked in the ICU, one day I had to float down to the ED.
No.
In the ICU, we're always like, why are they always like trying to rush the patient up and
Yeah. Yeah.
all this stuff? And so I get down to ED, and they're like, oh yeah, you're gonna put you in triage. And so I'm in triage. I was like, whoa, like where's the ICU? We got to get these patients up there. And the point being is that sometimes that role reversal is so important. And in school, one of the MDAs, he's like, we're gonna switch, and you're gonna go do all the pre-ops, and I'm gonna be in the room, and we're gonna just kind of switch that role. And it made me realize like how much they have to do. So I think like those are just some fun ways of kind of just switching it up and just appreciating what they do.
I think that's such a really great way, and I've never had it phrased to me as role reversal, and I like that concept. And just as we were talking here, it made me think about another thing that was actually on my list that I realized was what I asked in my interviews. What's the relationship like with the anesthesia techs? Because I think that's another relationship that's equally as important. That can make or break your day, especially when shift change is occurring. How much can they do for you? What can you also do for them? Because I mean, a lot of the times you'll just have two anesthesia techs running all the ORs and they're running around equally as much as we are, if not more. So that was definitely one of the things that I was asking about as well.
That's a great point. I didn't realize this till after starting, but like what they do for the techs to kind of show appreciation. Like, maybe there's like a nurse's appreciation for your hospital, but to see like what they do for the techs, I know like we'll do like a Christmas thing for them and all kind of pitch in, but that's a healthy kind of way to ask like, hey, what do you guys do for the techs? You guys hang out of work, or how's that relationship?
Text can make or break your day, man. I'm telling you.
You've been doing this for, you said, pretty much about 2 years now. Is there anything that you would have done differently, Jay, in your job search? And Kev, you can piggyback on this too, because I know our stories were very different in the sense that, like, for our audience, Kev did so much work in trying to figure out where he wanted to be
Mhm.
and which hospital he wanted to bless with his presence. Um, so like, and it was so opposite for me. It was like I knew exactly where I like wanted to be one town because I was just so dead set on being near my family. So like, even if you just do kind of like a cross comparison between the two of you, and like maybe what would you have done differently? Would you have spent less time researching this, more time researching that?
I think the most important thing, looking back at that whole process, was just being appreciative of the advice I received on breaking this down. But it was a big move, 800 miles away, not knowing that. But honestly, I truly don't have any regrets, just because I feel fortunate enough that I was able to figure out what's most important for me and also my wife, right? Because if you have a significant other or a family member you're going with, like, it's not just about you, it's about your day to day.
Yeah.
So you really do need to find that job that meets both of you guys and your needs, or your children's needs. If I stayed where I was currently and maybe not taken the opportunity to leave the smallest state in the U.S., I would have kind of probably stayed there, and a lot of people do. So just have the courage to leave. But yeah, to answer your question, like nothing specific. How do you feel, Kevin?
I always say this, that like we have it really super easy these days with the internet and all the resources that we as like, future CRNAs have. Like I really used like, the CRNA, what is it, the job hiring Facebook page or something like that. I don't know what it is, but if you're curious about it, ask anyone and they know about it. And it's like you can just go in the search bar and search whatever hospital you're visiting. And there will be people talking trash about it. Not actually, but the people giving their opinion about it on the Facebook
But
forum.
people do also talk trash. Like,
Yes,
let's
they
be
do, they
honest.
do, absolutely. But, you can get a contact on there basically. So, you use your gas work and then you use that Facebook page and you basically have a connection to every single hospital in the US. Another thing a lot of people don't know is like, in your second year, if you want to tour a hospital, a lot of places will reimburse your trip out too. So, my second year, I went out again to a few places on the West Coast and it was completely reimbursed. I wasn't dilly-dallying. I was researching the future of my career, but you are, as even if it doesn't feel like it, you are a high level provider now. And, they're not only interviewing you, you're interviewing them just as much. So keep that confidence up and don't feel like you're an imposter when you're walking through there. That's my 2 cents. I don't know. It was a fun journey finding a job for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we can all take solace in the fact that like they say, you can throw an arrow or whatever at a map and you will find work. It might not be exactly what you want, but like you can make a decent amount of money at almost any city in the world. And not a lot of professions can say that. Even like more specialized physicians, like they can't even say that. Like we can work in any corner of the United States, basically, in my opinion.
Also, too, like the idea that your first job doesn't have to be your last job.
That's huge.
Taking a little bit of pressure off, just kind of realize it's not going to be the last one. Just like, we're in nursing, it's like a lot of people had multiple jobs. And I think now too, the big thing is a lot of people do the PRN thing, and, the credential at multiple facilities kind of gives you have a lot of options these days. So
Yeah, that's a really great point too. Again, you can tell I overthink a lot, but like I think one of the anesthesiologists who ran one of the groups I was at, she was just like, "Hey kid, it's not going to be your last job. I even know this. So just chill out a little bit, like even if you sign a 2-year sign-on bonus, we can make that money and give it back if we really hate it, at the end of the day."
The job that I landed, there was my sign-on bonus, but it's split up in the months over the 3-year contract that I have. So, not that I'm planning on it, but like, let's say like halfway through, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta move out of here. I can't stay this anymore. This is toxic. I don't have to pay it back, like, cause it's split up. It's like every 3 months I get X amount of dollars. So, and that was something that I didn't even think about, but that was presented to me. And I know there's people, like Kevin, I think you got your sign-on
Half.
bonus, like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
got
you got it up,
half.
like, yeah, half up front. I haven't even gotten mine, but I'm okay with that because I know that it still feels like, even though I know I don't plan to take an out, I still have an out. And it's just another thing to think about. And then something that's also coming down the line for me, and maybe we can dive into this a little bit, or maybe this will be an entirely different episode itself, because I definitely would like expert opinions, is just finding a place to live. And what I mean by that is, like, it's not just apartment living anymore. Like, I'm going to be 32 in February. I want a house. I want a full kitchen and a backyard and a porch.
Nah,
What do you mean,
nah.
nah? Don't knock me.
I
I
want
need
a high
people to live.
rise in the
Oh,
city.
you're insane. I refuse to take any more elevators with trash bags and grocery bags. I'm done. Like, I really am done. I want to paint living rooms. I want, anyways, I digress. So, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could even go into with, like, mortgages and things like that are out there for individuals that are in healthcare, and how to get a mortgage even though you still have a bunch of loans. So, I mean, that, and this, like I said, could be an entirely different episode, but I still think it's wrapped under the umbrella of finding your first job, or even just finding another job as a CRNA. Because another thing that I was trying to think about was, like, okay, what's my commute going to look like? When do I actually have to physically be in the hospital in my scrubs? All right, so let's subtract, I don't know, 30 minutes. What time am I waking up in the morning? Because that's another thing that's important to me. How many days a week am I working? I'm doing, with the job that I signed up for, is 313s, but then I can pick up an extra shift during the week, which I also really love, and I plan on doing that. So there's so much more than just, is there a good relationship between the MDAs and the techs, and what is the different type of model that this hospital is using? What is the patient population that this hospital has, and then pay. So there's a lot to it. I'm glad we're talking about it.
So many good points. You probably could do a whole episode on, I do have one to share, but on like red flags when your first job, or something like that. Because one of the SRNAs, actually a lot of them kept asking, what are your thoughts on, is it a red flag if they have a sign-on bonus? I actually thought about it for a moment and I was like, I really don't think it is anymore, because I went and looked on all of these job boards, and honestly, go on there and find one that doesn't have a bonus, because to me, that's more of a red flag at this point, because of how competitive our market is. If you're not doing what the other person's doing, then you're not really trying to compete. And so, but you can use that to your advantage. Like you said, Olivia, like trying to find the ones that maybe you won't be forced to pay back, or that type of situation. But I feel like honestly, a lot of them I looked and they have a lot of sign-on bonuses, but you can take that to your advantage. And then another thing that you mentioned that you could do a whole nother episode on is, they call it physician mortgages. But under that physician mortgage, it could be a dentist, it could be a CRNA. High-paying, successful individuals qualify, and it kind of just depends on what state you're in. But that is something I knew we wanted to do. You have a lot of loans. You want to live in a house, Olivia, so your cat can maybe go outside. But there was a lot of those in the U.S. Not every state does it, but we were successful and able to do that. So that's a great opportunity to look more into, that you guys could probably certainly educate people on.
Yeah, man. Did you feel like, I don't know, this might just be a me thing, but like, I feel like I've been so engulfed in like my career since basically high school to now, getting out of the gate and just learning about these things that were not taught in school, like what is a 1099? What is an LLC? And I've had to open an LLC, and then I had to make an S corp. And I'm like, I really don't know what any of this is. And, it's taking care of like things that you haven't had to take care of for like 3 years. Did you feel a little bit of that when you were coming out?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, the whole thing was still overwhelming, even if you simplified it into the things we talked about. And then you add on the, buying a home or a family, or, maybe you're looking for a school. As far as the 1099 stuff, I know a lot of people were, my class were looking at that. To your point, I had no information on that, and we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
I felt like, I mean, the programs that you go to, they have so much responsibility and to prepare you pass the boards and be a proficient CRNA and successful, but you don't talk about the opportunities afterwards. I think the thing that's like those conferences that we met at, and those other ones, like there's so much opportunity to educate people, and just networking. And it goes back to the point we talked about earlier. Like, It's a tight-knit community. So somebody knows somebody, and then you can just gain that knowledge from somebody else. But yeah, I maybe one day down the road with a 1099, I know it's like, again, it goes back to the compensation. If that's really important to you, you can maximize that. But that really wasn't my priority. That was number 3 on my list. So again, I do 312s. So Olivia, like, you probably seems like you like the work-life balance as well with the 313s, and then it gives you that flexibility.
Yeah, and we know someone who knows somebody. We've done an episode with Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce about 1099. Just a self plug right there.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But yeah, man, my last kind of question with like getting your first job, contracts, right? Did you have someone comb through a contract with you? Did you just read it real careful? What was before you signed, did you do anything special?
Yeah, and here we go again, Kevin. You could do another episode on this.
Yeah.
I guess the financial part in school, and so what I mean by that is, I was lucky enough where I knew I needed help with like the financial planning. So I went ahead and I was listening to a podcast, and they talked about that. Hey, we recommend you getting a financial planner. Do your own research and find someone. And there's so many out there now that are, specifically for CRNAs and SRNAs. So that was something I was like, I got to get on that. So I did that like my first year just to kind of help plan everything out. So to answer your question, Kevin, when I was finally at that stage where I could think about contracts and that stuff, I had them read over. It was technically a contract, but just the fine print, having some expert knowledge on that. So that's a great point. You guys can certainly talk about that. And I feel like the financial planning, hopefully we keep talk about that in school, the contract type of stuff, where to work, how to work, all those types of things. There's so many opportunities to talk about it. And I feel like definitely undereducated.
Olivia, what'd you do with yours?
100% forwarded it to my father.
Yeah, me too. I had my immigrant dad read it.
It went right to Dad. I was like, I opened that document and I was like, what? And I literally went, because I was in Charleston at the time, and I just walked right on over to the kitchen. I said, Dad, let me make you a drink. You're going to tell me what the heck this says, because I have no clue.
Was it a lot of pages?
It was.
Couldn't tell you. She didn't read it.
Yeah, I know I didn't. I can tell you there were a lot of figures, tables and such. But he flipped through it, and he's like, and he's not even explaining it out loud. I love my dad so much, but he was just like, oh, that's great. Oh, and this is even great. And I'm like, what the hell is he saying? I don't know. I'm like, okay, just keep giving me the thumbs up, old man. I love you. But all right. It's just, it pays to really have someone in your family who knows what those things are saying. And if you don't, and you're not fortunate like me, you absolutely get a planner or a financial planner, because that was going to be my next step. If it's whole other language, it's one of those things where it's just like, we could read a patient's chart and all the little like cryptic words, shorthand notions of it all, and it'll make sense to us. But if I handed that to my dad, he'd be like, what does any of this mean? So it's language. It's definitely something that you need to take the time and read over, and not just like scroll sign, because it's your life.
There's certain buzzwords I think people say to look out for, right? Like what non-compete, do you care about that? Do you care if you have a non-compete and you can't work while you're signed onto this place? I don't know if you know anything else like kind of along the lines of that, Jay, like any little things you would tell someone to look for in a contract.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that Olivia brought up too, like that big thing, is the sign-on bonus. So because everyone's doing it like that, how does that work? It's tricky because it's an awkward question to ask, right? Like, hey, yeah, I'd love to work here, I think. But by the way, when it comes to that sign-on bonus, 3 years, like what happens? Like life changes though. So like that's the reality of it. But it is challenging to ask that question, but it's an important question to ask. I would say that would be my biggest thing, is how does that work? Because a lot of them are 4 years. And I mean, but then the bonus sounds great, say it's 100 over 4 or however it is, these days. But, paying that back is a lot, because we talked about, your first job doesn't be your last. So 4 years in our profession is kind of a long time.
Long time, man. That's a big opportunity cost right there.
Right. And then your goals, like buying a house, like that might quickly change in 4 years, like what you want to do. So, but I think the bonus thing would probably be the biggest thing, and let the experts be the experts. Like let us do the anesthesia, let the financial planners, like, and maybe the attorneys or whoever your dads or whoever you want to read over it.
Just be humble about it.
Just be humble about it. And you don't have to know about that, and that's okay. But asking for help for that stuff is huge.
Definitely.
I do want to transition. Like I've kind of been asking everybody this just because I'm so curious, everyone's opinion, but like, Where do you see the anesthesia job market going in the next few years? I don't know if this is at all your sector or if you've looked into this at all. I just, I've been seeing, there's a lot more CRNA schools coming up, right? Insurance cuts have been happening behind our backs, basically, and they're going to continue happening unless something drastic happens or something like that, But it looks like it's kind of going that way. Do you ever worry about like job security or anything like that? What's your take on this?
No, for the job security. I mean, you talk about like AI and
Yeah.
how that is affecting
Yeah.
other job security.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate that we will never have to worry about that. I think it's just a very supply and demand profession and just world in general, but specifically with us, like the amount of patients that need anesthesia, the demand is just so critically high. Then the supply is just not there. We talked about, I looked it up too, not that long ago, but I think there's like roughly 8,300 SRNAs in the US. And you did say like there are so many new schools coming up and trying to fix that demand. But I still think it's so far out. And then you have so many options too. Like you have medical residents, you have the AAs, and you have multiple ways to give anesthesia. And that changes throughout the US. But I feel like we're very fortunate not to have to worry about that. But as far as the way it's going, I would say the power is in the CRNA in the sense that of your options, whether that's doing locums, traveling, working 10 hours here, maybe doing 10 hours being an associate professor somewhere. You really do have so many options. So I think it's an exciting time overall just to be in this profession. And I tell people, if you can get in here, it just feels a little bit different than, bedside specifically, just because of the autonomy and so many opportunities out there. And even podcasts. I mean, look at this. Like, we have the opportunity to go on here and to educate, talk about all these different things like that. I mean, I'm sure there's nurses that have a million, wonderful podcasts, but there's just so much to talk about. So there's a lot of episodes and a lot of things to talk about. So I feel like it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I always ask people, and it's like 50% doom and gloom and 50% like it's gonna be great. And no one has that magic 8 ball, but you're right, and like the demand is definitely there right now. So like you would never tell someone not to go in this profession, correct?
No. I think I would tell people this, like SRNA school is for sure the hardest thing you may ever do, but I would do it over again. Without
You
thinking
would?
about it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry,
where
you
I'm
could
at.
not pay me
Just kidding.
enough to make me go back to CRNA school. I am so glad that I am almost four, a little bit under 4 months shy of graduating. I told my mother, I was like, I'm never doing this again. If I fail out, I'm gonna go work as a vet tech because at least then I can hold cats and dogs all day.
But let me ask you this though, Olivia. But like in a year and you get that house and you're feeling very fortunate, just saying like from being in a humble situation to where I am now and the things I can provide and that type of stuff, like absolutely I would do it over again because I know that I couldn't necessarily have the things that I did, just at the bedside unless I was going to do the travel nursing all the time. But that's a hard life.
Yeah, it's not fun.
To be able to work 312s or 313s, however you want to do it and live comfortably and love what you do, truly love what you do and, impact so many different patients. I mean, yes, I would do it all over again. I think that just shows though, like, yes, it's the hardest thing, but to our points, like it's just so worth it. That's the big thing.
No, I mean, like, let me put it this way. I think it's just maybe it's like where I went to school or the fact that I was away from my family. But at the end of the day, can I sit here and absolutely say without a shadow of a doubt that I'm in the profession that I genuinely love to do every single day and I'm like happy to do it. And it to me beats bedside ICU nursing 7 days out of the week? Absolutely. But, like, right now, it's just total crunch mode, and I feel like I'm crawling to that finish line. So, I think, I don't know what is senioritis, or I don't even know if it's senioritis, but just, like, the senior bitterness or whatever is just, like, kicks in every now and again, but I don't know. Ask me in 4 months that same question, we'll see if my answer
Yeah.
changes.
Well, I think that's just time perspective. It'll change. It'll change.
Yeah, honestly, I think we should talk in 6 months because
We-
I think it'll be a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
God, I hope so,
Yeah.
because there's a bathroom renovation that I need to do, and it's gonna cost me close to $40,000, and you're right, being a CRNA can help me. What do you mean, no? I love picking out tile now. It is my new personality, as well as picking out hardboard floor. I know a lot more than I did 2 weeks ago.
Well, let me ask you one question because it just on that, based on how your program was and how your schooling was and it was very challenging, would you ever consider going back to school to teach? and maybe bringing an element that you thought they should have done or something differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I try to even do that right now with this podcast, with like today, I had an SRNA, like a junior SRNA with me. And I used today as, okay, let's not take a back seat. Let's see what Olivia's like now as a preceptor, like a pre-preceptor. It's just kind of mentally doing that. What am I going to act like? What do I want them to focus on? What am I going to care about? Based off of my experiences, the very positive and also the very negative, and how can I make and cultivate a very positive learning environment for another SRNA, because that is so damn important. I don't think anyone should get into this profession and be scared out of their mind to go to clinical and just be shaking in their boots. Like I want them to be happy, and to be able to feel like they can ask me questions and we can trial and error certain things, because a lot of anesthesia is actually tinkering with things. And I think that it kind of like touches into that like engineer side of my brain that I really like. But yeah, to go back to it, I absolutely would love to go back and teach and be a preceptor. I was a nursing student preceptor as well, and it was the highlight of my time as being a nurse.
How do you feel, Kevin?
You talk to my teachers who have been on the podcast, and it's purely a love thing. You know what I'm saying? So these kids are a little spoiled these days. They're a little. The students can be a little. I've heard they're a little. And it doesn't sound like they're getting paid that much. Not that it's about the money, but it just seems like they're working double time for like half the pay. I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I would do it part time maybe, but I think once I get a little more established in my career, for sure, I would think about it.
When he's in a wheelchair,
Yeah,
that's when
exactly.
he'll
That is
stand at the front of the lecture hall.
yes. Let me get the gray hairs first, and we can talk about it. But I don't know. I do think about it, but yeah, just it's teaching. I mean, in general, it's just one of those thankless jobs.
I'll say this. I thought the same with you guys. I was like, yeah, that's not for me. But then we have the opportunity to precept, and then you're like, oh, we have a student with you today. And you're like, oh, okay. So and I remember that the first time doing that, I was like, you're teaching, like
Yeah.
you're in it depending on the level and stuff. And but the exciting part about that is that you, like you said, Olivia, you can, the bad days that you had, and you remember that more than you remember probably the good. And so you have the power to give back to the SRNA and say, like, maybe giving them the power. But I think that's such an exciting thing, because I feel like when we were bedside, nurses, maybe it just felt different. And so I feel like, I don't know, we're going to be, like you said, Arizona, Kevin, and I don't know if they have a lot of students there, but I kind of want to talk to you after you've been working with a lot of the students, and just kind of seeing how that goes, because you're going to be back in the teaching. You know what I mean?
Dude, yeah, I know. And it really is one of those, like, you have a lot of priceless moments, I think. I mean, there's nothing more than like cultivating a whole person's career. When I passed boards, I FaceTimed my teacher, and she was crying and I was crying, and it was a whole thing. It was very cute. And she was like, "This is why I teach." At the end of the day, none of the, it's hard, but I mean, that's why she teaches. And it was just a very cute, wholesome moment. So, it takes a personality, it takes love, and who knows, maybe I'll get into it and I'll be professor superstar, but we'll see.
I will bet you money Kevin ends up
Yes.
being a huge preceptor, and I bet you he gets like some sort of award about it.
Oh, here we go.
No, I
The
know,
preceptor
I know
award.
this man.
Yeah.
Okay, he's the same one that fell asleep while I was practicing my dissertation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he hung with me.
Yes, we've had a time.
Well, I want to know too, like in 6 months, Kevin, when you're working with the students, and you might not even realize your anesthesia pet peeves, but
Yeah,
everyone has them. They're real, and so, but they're individualized to you. So when you're working with it, you're developing your own, your new practice. You get to do all the things that you want to do out of school, and you don't have a preceptor. So you're going to start to do your own thing, and you're going to have your plan, and then someone's going to do something differently, and you're going to like, yeah, maybe that's a pet peeve. I don't like that, so.
And you got to decide if you want to interject or not, kind of thing.
Yeah, because you go back to that. Now you're like, oh, but the good thing is, because we were so fresh, you're going to make the best preceptor, because you guys are so, it was just yesterday, so you're going to say, oh, it's not a big deal,
no, and even just to add on to that, like today when I had my junior SRNA with me, we came in the room, we were setting up the room together, and he turned to me and he said, "Okay, Olivia, how do you want me to set it up? Where do you want me to put the drugs?" And I said, "No, blank name, X name. I want you to figure out what works for you. because part of the thing that was just so exhausting sometimes about being in clinical is just me trying to just memorize what made my preceptor happy. And that's not the point of this. The point of this is as long as you're providing safe anesthesia and you have I want them to find their own workflow. What works for them. Where do you want to put your pressors? What way do you want to face them? I do not care, because what really just matters is, do you understand what works for you? And just building that early on and not just mimicking what I like to do. I wasn't a very expected question today. And then it just was that moment where I was like, yeah, that's not, I hope from this day forward that is not one of those things that I'm really particular about, oh, well, the calcium stick has to be over up at the top or whatever. Let them learn their own workflow. They don't have to be, somebody's copycat. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and let's figure out what they want to do.
Absolutely.
So I just want to wrap up. We have one more question. This is just totally off the cuff, like general tips, newcomer CRNAs, RNs, whatever. What last words of wisdom does Jay Cobden have for the world before we end this podcast?
Yeah, I would just honestly sit down, enjoy the moment, right? Like, you guys have worked so hard just to get to this opportunity to decide where you want to work next. Remember the things we kind of talked about. Your first job isn't going to be your last job. Take the pressure off. Break it down, sit down with your loved ones. It is a big decision, but sit down with the people that you're going to be living with. And then, to all the points that we kind of talked about, think about the little things, where you're going to be living, what's there to do around there, what are your hobbies, are there places around there? So just take the big picture in. You guys work so hard to research all of this stuff, but put that kind of same energy right back into, your future again, because now that it's just going to flip real quick. So again, just to reiterate the things that I kind of talked about, just break it down to 3 golden rules. Find out what's most important to you: compensation, work-life balance, or autonomy. Simplify the process, enjoy the process, and then go find your first job, and best of luck.
Perfect.
Yeah, and celebrate.
Yes.
Yep. All right, Jay Cobden, thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate you.
It's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
Want to be the voice of the next season of Grade 1 View? Well, we're looking for new hosts for Season 2, launching in 2026. If you're a CRNA student or resident with at least 12 months left in your program, this is your chance to grab a mic and shape the conversation. Apply by November 1st at aana.com/G1V, or just check the description of today's show for a link. Let your voice be heard on Grade 1 View.